So when Christ is transfigured on the mount, two prophets appear with him. One is Moses, and that's obvious why that is. But the other is Elijah. And Elijah, compared to Moses, is a relatively minor figure. And so here's the key psychological significance, let's say, of Elijah. So Elijah set himself up against Jezebel, who was a queen at that time, a foreign queen of Israel, who had introduced the worship of Baal into the Israeli culture. And Baal was a nature god. And so Elijah has a famous dispute with the prophets of Baal and ends up with Yahweh's help defeating them. And so he establishes supremacy over Baal.
This is a golden calf.
Yeah. He builds an altar. He builds an altar and challenges the prophets of Baal to have the sacrifice destroyed by their God, and that doesn't happen. And then he calls on Yahweh, who sends down fire to destroy not only the sacrifice, but the altar itself. And then he has the prophets of Baal put to death, which doesn't exactly thrill Jezebel. And then he runs away because she's after him. So he's hiding out in a cave, and he feels he's the only one left who's still an acolyte of Yahweh in the entire, Israelite polity. And a thunderstorm happens, a very, very violent thunderstorm, followed by a very violent earthquake. And Elijah realizes that God is not in the earthquake and not in the thunder, that he is instead the still small voice. That's where that phrase comes from. So it's the first marked internalization of the notion of the deity, is that whatever the highest deity is something that you can commune with internally that is roughly equivalent, let's say, to the voice of conscience. And so that's Elijah. Right. It's amazing. Now, what happens in Job is so interesting because in the story of Job, God has a bet with Satan. It's a very nasty story, right?
It's the most brutal story.
It's a brutal story. Job is a good man, and God thinks so, and so does Satan. And Satan is invited by God to have a few words with him and says, I bet you that I can destroy the faith of your good man, Job. And God says, yeah, I don't think so. Have at her, buddy. And so Job loses everything, and in the most painful possible manner. And what he does, as far as I can tell, is that he uses that internal guide of conscience, which was now, say, allied with the voice of God in some sense, against these terrible external forces that are conspiring to bring him down, right? Because his wife dies.
The children will die.
Children die.
The cattle die. He's covered in boils.
Yeah, and his friends are making fun of him because they think he must have done something to deserve this, right? So he's like taken to the bottom of reality. But he refuses to lose faith. Now, you might say that the logical conclusion from that misadventure is that Job has every rational reason to shake his fist at the sky and curse God, right? But he doesn't. He maintains faith in the goodness of being, despite the fact that he's suffering dreadfully.
Yeah.
And I've watched people in the deep throes of misery. And I can tell you that one of the things that will make misery hell is ingratitude. And so part of the story of Job seems to me to be an injunction, and that is that no matter what happens to you, and that means in some sense, no matter the facts at hand, that you are called upon never to lose faith in the essential goodness of being, right? To conduct yourself as if, what would you say? The cosmos itself is well structured, despite the evidence that happens to be being presented to you within the confines of your life. And I think that's the same as the practice of gratitude.